Can a train, a colossal machine of steel and steam, just vanish from our reality? Not crash, not derail, but simply cease to exist, leaving behind nothing but a chilling legend? This is the story of the Zanetti Ghost Train, a locomotive said to be unstuck in time, carrying its 104 passengers on an endless spectral journey across history. Our tale begins in Italy, back in 1911. The Zanetti Railway Company was ready to launch the maiden voyage of a brand new luxury excursion train. This wasn't just any train. It was a three-car symbol of progress, a showcase of modern engineering designed for the wealthiest of Italian society. 104 passenger socialites, businessmen, and their families boarded in Rome for a scenic tour through a newly constructed mountain tunnel in Lombardy. They were promised breathtaking views and unparalleled comfort. What they found, according to the legend, was a gateway to oblivion. The journey was meant to be a celebration. The press was there to document the departure, capturing the excitement of the well-known figures embarking on this exclusive tour. The centerpiece was the passage through a new, impressively long tunnel piercing the Lombardy mountains, an engineering marvel for its time. As the locomotive confidently steamed towards the dark archway, passengers waved from the windows, anticipating the short trip through the mountain. On the other side, photographers and officials waited to welcome them. But the minutes stretched into an hour. An eerie silence fell over the valley. The train never emerged. Search parties were dispatched immediately. They walked the entire length of the tunnel, their lanterns cutting through the oppressive darkness. They found nothing. The rails were clear. The tunnel was structurally sound. The multi-ton locomotive and its 3 cars were gone. It was a logistical and physical impossibility. How could something so massive vanish without a trace inside a contained, linear space? There was no explosion, no wreckage, no sign of what had happened. It was as if the train and every soul aboard were erased from existence. The official response was one of complete bafflement. The railway company, facing a public relations nightmare, launched an extensive investigation that yielded absolutely no answers. With public fear and speculation growing, the authorities made a drastic decision. They ordered the tunnel to be sealed. Massive stone walls were erected at both entrances, permanently closing the passage. Officially, this was chalked up to safety concerns. But for believers in the legend, it was a desperate attempt to close a portal and contain a phenomenon they couldn't possibly comprehend. But the story doesn't end there. Because while 104 people were lost, the legend insists that 2 passengers did not share their fate. Just before the train entered the tunnel, 2 people allegedly managed to jump from one of the moving cars. Their testimony is the only first-hand account we have, and it transforms this mystery into a full-blown paranormal event. They described a sudden, bizarre phenomenon. A milky white fog, cold to the touch, billowed out from the tunnel entrance and seemed to swallow all sound. As the train plunged into this thick, unnatural mist, a low-frequency hum vibrated through the cars. And a wave of inexplicable primal fear gripped everyone on board. Their decision to jump wasn't rational. It was pure, unadulterated instinct. Overwhelmed by a sudden, paralyzing panic, they threw themselves from the train onto the rocky ground below. They watched as the final car was completely consumed by the dense white fog and disappeared into the mouth of the tunnel. It was the last anyone ever saw of the Zanetti train. Naturally, the survivor's story was met with heavy skepticism. Doctors and authorities dismissed it as a shared delusion, a story born from trauma and shock. Yet their account of the chilling fog and the unnerving hum remained consistent. Without their testimony, the event is just a strange disappearance. With it, the story becomes a terrifying encounter with the unknown, suggesting the tunnel wasn't just a passage through a mountain, but a gateway to somewhere else. This idea that the tunnel was a portal is reinforced by the decision to seal it. The authorities, even a select few, believed the survivors, then the tunnel wasn't just a failed piece of infrastructure. It was an act of anomaly. Closing it wasn't about preventing a rock slide. It was about preventing whatever was inside from getting out again. It was a desperate act of quarantine, an attempt to lock a door to another place. Over the decades, that sealed tunnel has become a focal point for paranormal enthusiasts. There are unverified reports of strange noises emanating from behind the stone walls, of a low hum on quiet nights, or a faint cold mist seeping from cracks in the masonry. The sealed tunnel stands as a physical monument to the mystery, a place you can actually visit, which adds a strange sense of reality to this ethereal tale. But this is where the story gets truly bizarre. The disappearance was only the beginning. The legend's most unsettling claim is that the train didn't crash or get destroyed. It simply crossed a boundary, becoming a phantom locomotive destined to reappear randomly throughout history. The most famous of these alleged sightings reportedly occurred in Mexico City in the 1840s. That's right, more than 70 years before the Zanetti train was even built. The story goes that 104 Italians, all dressed in strange, old-fashioned clothing, suddenly appeared in the city, claiming they had arrived by train from Rome. They were all institutionalized, deemed insane. No one could figure out where they came from or how they got there. This claim introduces a mind-bending time paradox that elevates the story from a simple ghost sighting to a complex temporal enigma. How could a train from 1911 appear in the 1840s? This detail is what makes the Zanetti legend so compelling. It's not just a ghost story. It's a time-traveling ghost story about an object unstuck from the linear progression of history. The Mexican incident is presented as the first piece of evidence that the train did and just vanish, but entered a non-linear existence, its journey unbound by the laws of physics and time as we know them. But the sightings don't stop there. Over the years, reports have surfaced from all over Europe and Asia. In the 1950s, a railway worker in Ukraine supposedly saw a silent, three-car train moving along an embankment, with its windows curtained and its driver wearing what looked like a brown uniform. In the 1990s, another sighting was reported near Poltava, where a paranormal researcher allegedly managed to jump aboard the phantom train, only to vanish along with it. Each of these stories passed down through folklore and the internet adds another layer to the myth. They describe a silent, spectral train moving impossibly along tracks, or, in some cases, where no tracks exist at all. It appears without warning and vanishes just as quickly, a fleeting glimpse into another reality. Of course, there is no hard evidence for any of this. There's no photographs, no official records, just a collection of third-hand accounts and creepy campfire tales. The entire story of the Zanetti Ghost Train could very well be a modern myth, a piece of internet folklore that has grown and evolved over time. Skeptics point out that there are no official records from 1911 in Italy that mention a disappearing train or 104 missing people. The Zanetti Railway Company itself appears to be a fabrication. The story seems to have originated much later, likely in the 1980s or 90s, and spread like wildfire online. The details, like the Mexican appearance in the 1840s, were probably added over time to make the story more intriguing and mysterious. But, whether it's real or not, the legend of the Zanetti Ghost Train touches on some of our deepest fears. The fear of the unknown, the fear of losing control, and the chilling idea that reality might be far stranger and more fragile than we think. It's a story about a journey that was supposed to be a triumph of technology, but instead became a terrifying voyage into the impossible. A train full of people, frozen in a single moment. Endlessly traveling through time, occasionally brushing up against our world just long enough to remind us that some mysteries may never be solved. They just keep rolling down the track forever. Thanks for watching. What do you think about the Zanetti Ghost Train? Is it a genuine paranormal event or just a fascinating urban legend? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more dives into the unknown. See you next time. Imagine this. It's the 1840s in Mexico. Life is simple. Transportation is primitive. Then, out of nowhere, a sleek, three-car train appears on the tracks. It's completely silent, moving without the chugging and smoke of a steam engine. It looks like something from a far-off future. For the locals, it was an impossible, terrifying sight. This wasn't just a case of mistaken identity. No train like this existed anywhere in the world. Its appearance was so unnatural, it defied all logic, suggesting something operating outside the known laws of physics. The legend says the train wasn't just a missing object. It was an active traveling paradox, a ripple in the fabric of time. Of course, the historical accuracy of this 19th century report is highly questionable, probably emerged much later, added to the legend to make it even more mysterious. There are no verifiable newspaper articles or official records from that time describing such an event. But the lack of proof does little to diminish its power within the story. It sets the stage for a train that can cross not just countries, but entire centuries. To make the Mexican sightings seem more real, the legend includes what sounds like an official account. It points to a supposed report from a Mexico City psychiatrist in the 1840s. This doctor allegedly documented the sudden arrival of 104 people at a local asylum. They were all hysterical, dressed in strange, foreign clothing made of unusual materials, and couldn't explain how they got to Mexico. Their pocket watches and leather goods were styles no one recognized. Most disturbingly, they all claimed to have been on a train from Rome. This was, of course, utterly nonsensical at the time. The doctor diagnosed them with mass hysteria, a shared delusion. They spoke Italian, and kept mentioning a Zanetti train, a name that was recorded as part of their collective madness. This so-called doctor's report is a masterful narrative trick. It lends a scientific air of authenticity to a paranormal claim, grounding the impossible in a clinical setting and making the passenger's fate seem more real and tragic. What happened to these 104 displaced people? The story implies they were left to languish in the asylum, their incredible tale of time travel dismissed as insanity. They became prisoners of a time that wasn't their own, their identities lost forever. This adds a deeply human and horrifying layer to the legend, focusing not just on the ghost train but on the terrifying fate of those trapped aboard. After this bizarre sighting in Mexico, the phantom train seemingly vanished for nearly a century. The legend then reignites during the Cold War, a period already thick with paranoia and secrecy. It was in this tense global atmosphere that the Zanetti train reportedly began appearing on the tracks of the Soviet Union. One of the most famous sightings happened in 1955 near Poltava, Ukraine. A railway worker on a routine inspection claimed to have seen the train glide silently past him on an unused section of track. He described an old three-car European train with curtains drawn in the windows. It moved without a sound before vanishing. Another report came from near Moscow in the late 1970s. A group of railway employees supposedly saw the same spectral train cross a bridge at an impossible speed before disappearing into thin air. Each sighting shared common details. The train was silent, it appeared on abandoned tracks, and it always had the same three-car design. These consistent details helped build a cohesive, cross-continental myth. These Soviet-era sightings are fascinating because they were often suppressed, dismissed as propaganda or drunken delusions. Yet the stories persisted, spreading as whispers among railway workers across Eastern Europe. The train became a piece of forbidden folklore, a ghost haunting the rigid, atheistic infrastructure of the Soviet state. Its appearances directly contradicted the state's materialist ideology. The Cold War context gave the legend a new flavor. It was no longer just an Italian mystery but an international phenomenon, a force that couldn't be contained by political borders or military might. It was a phantom haunting the global machine, its purpose and destination a complete mystery. The scattered sightings of the ghost train might have remained isolated tales, if not for one man, Vasily Leschetti, Ukrainian paranormal researcher. Leschetti reportedly became obsessed with the phenomenon in the 1980s. He spent years collecting eyewitness accounts and historical records, believing the train held the key to understanding temporal physics. Leschetti theorized that the train was moving through rifts in time, its appearances coinciding with specific gravitational or electromagnetic anomalies. He meticulously mapped the sightings, from the alleged Mexican event to the Soviet apparitions, trying to find a pattern. He believed the train wasn't evil, but simply lost, a tragic vessel caught in a timeless loop. His research allegedly came to a head on September 25, 1991. According to his notes, Leschetti predicted the train's next appearance at a railway crossing near Poltava. The site of the 1955 sighting. Convinced he was on the verge of a breakthrough, he went to the location with cameras and scientific instruments, hoping to finally capture definitive proof. The last anyone heard from him was a frantic report that the train was approaching. Then silence. When his team arrived, Leschetti was gone. All that remained was his equipment, scattered near the tracks. The legend concludes that Vasily Leschetti didn't just witness the train's arrival, he became its next passenger. He had finally found his phantom, and in doing so, vanished aboard it, becoming part of the very mystery he sought to solve. This part of the story is the chilling climax. It elevates the threat, suggesting the train isn't just a passive specter, but an active force that can interact with our world. The fate of Vasily Leschetti serves as a grim warning to those who stare too long into the abyss. If you find these kinds of real-world horror stories fascinating, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the unexplained. Now, after tracing this dramatic legend, it's time to apply some critical analysis. The first and most crucial step is to look for verifiable evidence of the original 1911 event. If a luxury train with over 100 prominent citizens truly vanished, it would have been a massive international news story. Yet a thorough search of Italian newspaper archives from 1911 reveals nothing. There are no records of a railway company named Zanetti operating in Italy at that time. Major railways were either state-owned or run by large, well-documented corporations. There are no passenger manifests, no ticket stubs, and no grieving families demanding answers in the historical record. This complete absence of contemporary documentation is the single most significant piece of evidence we have. It strongly suggests the entire foundation of the story is fabricated. The facts, the date, the company, the passenger count appear to be details created to give the story a false sense of authenticity. Without a real event in 1911, the entire narrative collapses. The ghost train can't be the ghost of something that never existed. Likewise, the supporting evidence from later years also crumbles under scrutiny. The supposed 1840s report from a Mexican psychiatrist. It doesn't exist in any known medical archive. The doctor's name is never given, nor is the asylum. Similarly, the accounts from the Soviet era are purely anecdotal. They are campfire stories told by railway workers, not documented events. They lack any official reports or physical proof. So what we have isn't a paranormal case, but a fascinating study of how modern folklore is born and evolves over time. Thanks for watching. So, what about the paranormal investigator Vasily Leschati? While he might have been a real person with an interest in the paranormal, his dramatic disappearance on the train is unbacked up by any police reports or news articles from Ukraine in 1991. It looks like a narrative flourish, dramatic ending added to the legend to give it a final, terrifying punchline. It turns a collection of strange sightings into a full-blown cautionary tale. So if the Zanetti Ghost Train isn't a real historical event, where did this incredibly detailed and widespread story come from? Our investigation doesn't lead us to a dusty Italian archive, but to a work of fiction from 1988. The core elements of the legend bear a striking resemblance to a short story called The Ghost Train, written by the Ukrainian author and satirist Mykola Chornobrivets. Chornobrivets' story has all the key plot points: a train that enters a tunnel and vanishes, its reappearance throughout time, and the idea of it being lost in some kind of dimensional rift. The story was actually written as a philosophical allegory, not as a report of a real event. It seems that over time, this fictional work was mistaken for fact, or maybe even intentionally presented as fact, on early internet forums and in paranormal magazines. The story really took off in the 1990s through Russian-language media. In 1992, an article in the popular Russian magazine, Wonder and Adventures, retold the story, presenting it as a true, unsolved mystery. This magazine was hugely influential and reached a massive audience, cementing the legend in the public consciousness of post-Soviet countries. From there, the story likely spread to the internet and went global. The extra details like the Zanetti company name, the specific date in 1911, and the investigator Vasily Leschati seem to be later additions. Each new layer made the story more specific, more detailed, and therefore more believable. This is a common process in the creation of urban legends, where a compelling fictional idea is gradually decorated with facts to give it the weight of history. So, the creepy truth of the Zanetti train is that it's almost certainly a modern folktale, a piece of creepypasta that existed before the term was even coined. Its origins lie in the imaginative mind of a writer, not in a real-world tragedy. The true mystery isn't about a missing train, but about how a work of fiction can detach from its author and take on a life of its own, convincing millions of people that it's real. Understanding that the Zanetti train is fiction allows us to dissect it and see why it became so successful as a viral story. It has all the perfect ingredients for a modern urban legend. First, it has a specific, historical-sounding origin, setting the event in 1911. Italy gives it a sense of old-world mystery, and places it just far enough in the past to make records difficult to check, but not impossible. Second, the legend uses the kernel of truth technique, even if that kernel is made up. It uses real places like Italy, Mexico, and Ukraine, and grounds the paranormal events in seemingly plausible settings, like a railway tunnel or a medical asylum. The mention of a doctor's report or an academic investigator are classic tricks used to lend credibility to an otherwise unbelievable story. It mimics the structure of a true crime investigation. The central concept of a time-traveling ghost train is also deeply compelling. It taps into our fascination with time, paradoxes, and the idea of realities beyond our own. It's a much more intriguing idea than a simple haunting. The train isn't just a ghost reliving a tragic moment. It's an active anomaly, a rogue element moving through history. This complexity invites endless speculation and discussion, which is the lifeblood of any viral legend. Furthermore, the story has an element of conspiracy. The sealed tunnel implies a cover-up, suggesting that authorities know the terrifying truth but are hiding it from the public. This theme is incredibly powerful and gives people who believe the story a feeling of being in the know. It fosters a community of believers who share and expand the legend. Protecting it from skeptics by claiming the lack of evidence is actually proof of the cover-up. Finally, the story is a perfect example of how compelling horror evolves in the digital age. It's a narrative that's easily shared, summarized, and retold. Each retelling adds a new detail or a slight variation, keeping the story alive and dynamic. It's a collaborative piece of fiction, written by an anonymous global community. And its endurance is a testament to our collective desire to believe in mysteries that defy the ordinary world. The Zanetti Ghost Train isn't unique in the world of railway folklore. To better understand its appeal, we can compare it to an older, more established American legend, the ghost of Abraham Lincoln's funeral train. This story has been around since the late 19th century and shares many thematic similarities with the Zanetti tale. Illustrating a universal appeal for these kinds of spectral journeys, the Lincoln funeral train was a real train that carried the president's body from Washington, D.C. to Springfield, Illinois, in 1865. The legend claims that every year, on the anniversary of the journey in April, a phantom version of this train replays its mournful route. Eyewitnesses have claimed to see a ghostly locomotive, draped in black, silently passing by, with a coffin visible inside one of the cars, like the Zanetti train. Lincoln's ghost train is said to operate outside normal railway schedules and often appears on tracks where no train is due. Watches are said to stop, and a profound coldness fills the air as it passes. This connection between a paranormal event and a disruption of time and the environment is a common theme in both legends. It serves to heighten the sense of an unnatural intrusion into our world. The key difference, however, is the root of the story. The Lincoln train legend is tied to a real, deeply significant national tragedy. It serves as a form of cultural mourning, a folkloric memorial to a beloved leader. The Zanetti train, being fictional, lacks this historical anchor. It is a story about a random, inexplicable event, tapping into a more abstract, modern fear of technology gone wrong and the loss of identity. By comparing the two, we can see the evolution of the ghost train myth. The Lincoln story is rooted in grief and history, a ghost with a clear purpose and a fixed path. The Zanetti story is a product of a more chaotic, modern anxiety. Its ghost is unstuck in time, its path is random, and its passengers are anonymous victims of a cosmic accident. It represents a fear not of the past, but of a future where we can become lost in the machine. While the Zanetti legend itself is fictional, the experience of seeing a ghost can sometimes have rational, scientific explanations. Applying these to the context of railways can help us understand why these locations are such hotspots for paranormal folklore. Many of the sensory details described in ghost train stories, feelings of dread, strange sounds, and visual anomalies can potentially be explained by environmental factors. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the internet's most famous legends, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more mysteries. Let's see you next time. Have you ever felt a sudden chill, a sense of dread, or seen something flicker at the edge of your vision in a quiet old place? One of the most compelling theories behind these ghostly encounters is infrasound. This is sound at a frequency so low you can't hear it, but you can feel it as a vibration. Heavy machinery, geological shifts, even wind whistling through a tunnel can create it. Studies have shown that exposure to these low frequencies can trigger feelings of anxiety, deep sadness, and even cause visual hallucinations. It's not a ghost. It's physics messing with your brain. Then there's the simple power of suggestion. Old railway lines are naturally eerie. At night, your mind is on high alert. A distant car headlight, a flash of moonlight on the steel tracks. The lonely howl of the wind, all of these can be easily misinterpreted, especially if you're already expecting to see something supernatural. Once a place gets a reputation for being haunted, our brains are primed to find evidence that confirms it. Start looking for ghosts, so we see them. Have you ever been in a group where one person panics and suddenly everyone feels scared? That's a real psychological phenomenon, sometimes called a shared delusion. In the case of a group sighting, if one person has a startling experience, maybe due to infrasound or just misinterpreting a shadow, their fear and conviction can be contagious. Others in the group start to interpret their own feelings, their own racing hearts, through that same fearful lens. This can create multiple, sincere witnesses to an event that never actually happened in the way they remember it. Ultimately, the environment of a railway is a perfect storm of sensory triggers. The deep, echoing darkness of a tunnel, the whistle of the wind, the rhythmic hum of the tracks. These spaces are steeped in a history of immense power and noise. These very real, tangible sensations provide the raw material for our minds to construct a phantom. So, even though we know the story of the Zanetti train is a work of fiction, these real-world factors explain why ghost trains remain such a powerful and believable legend. But that leaves us with a deeper question. Why this story? Why do we keep telling tales about a ghost train carrying lost souls through time? Legends like this aren't just scary campfire stories. They're metaphors that reflect our collective anxieties. Think about it. In the early 20th century, trains were the pinnacle of technologies, symbols of power, progress, and speed. They also represented immense danger, the risk of catastrophic failure. A train that gets swallowed by the very tunnel it was built to conquer is a powerful metaphor for our fear that our own creations could overwhelm us, leading us into a darkness from which we can't escape. The theme of being lost in time also hits a nerve. The passengers on the fictional Zanetti train aren't just gone. They are perpetually adrift, stuck between moments, unable to find their place. This resonates deeply with our modern feelings of being disconnected from the past and anxious about the future. They are the ultimate lost souls, haunting symbol of what it feels like to be without an anchor in the fast-flowing river of time. Furthermore, a train journey is supposed to be a sure thing. It runs on a fixed track, with a clear beginning and a clear end. The true horror of the Zanetti legend is how it shatters that certainty. The track leads nowhere, the journey never ends, and the passengers lose all control over their own destiny. This taps into a primal fear that the predictable path of our own lives could suddenly derail, leaving us lost and powerless. So here we are, at a crossroads where fact and folklore meet. The tale of the Zanetti Ghost Train starts with the documented event, a luxury train with 106 people on board, and then veers off into a world of supernatural speculation and conflicting reports. It's a perfect example of how a real historical event, especially one clouded in mystery, can be hijacked by our collective imagination and sculpted into something far more bizarre and compelling. The real power of this legend isn't in any evidence of time travel or ghostly apparitions. Its power comes from the complete absence of a clear answer. This void, this lack of conclusion, is what allows the story to thrive, creates a space where every theory, from the scientifically plausible to the wildly paranormal, can take root. This persistent uncertainty is what transforms a historical curiosity into one of the most enduring horror stories of our time. Perhaps the most balanced view is one that starts with a kernel of truth. A train, the Zanetti, probably did exist and set off on a promotional journey. A tragic accident, maybe a tunnel collapse or a derailment, could have been the real event. Maybe it was poorly documented or even intentionally covered up by the company to avoid scandal. Over decades, this real tragedy was likely embellished layer by layer until it became the paranormal epic we know today. This is how so many urban legends are born. This narrative also speaks to our deep fascination with the unknown, with the very boundaries of our reality. Whether the passengers were victims of a mundane catastrophe or accidental time travelers, their story forces us to question what might lie just beyond our perception. It taps into our primal fears of being lost, of disappearing without a trace, and of the orderly progression of time suddenly breaking down without any warning. In the end, while the physical train almost certainly met a very real and final stop, the legend itself has become the true ghost train. It never stops running. It continues its journey through the internet, across forums, videos, and articles, forever traveling on phantom tracks powered by our own endless curiosity and our deep-seated desire to believe in something more. The ultimate mystery, then, isn't where the train went. It's why we feel so compelled to keep its story running forever and ever. Thanks for watching.